Hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 44 and Action Filmmaking Podcast. Always great to be here with my co host, Mike Messier. Mike, how the hell are you?
I'm doing good, Tommy. It's good to see you again. I know you had a big week with the Johnny and Clyde Rhode Island premiere, and I'm doing pretty well. I'm writing and doing some other things, and this is going to be an interesting episode. And we encourage people to subscribe to this channel. My channel, One Mike Messier, has Mike's instant movie reviews, and
Yep,
we're glad everybody's here.
we are excited to get into it. This week, we're going to be talking about going back to the well. And you might say, well, what does that mean exactly? As creatives, we often have many projects that are kind of circling through our minds. And sometimes you'll be working on something for a little while, and for whatever reason, you'll put a stop to it and you'll put it down. And sometimes these projects can kind of sit there and they'll remain dormant for weeks, months, and in many cases, even years. And today we're going to talk about going back to some of those old concepts that you might have created a long time ago that you gave up on for whatever reason, and breathing new life back into them, because timing is everything. And you never realize, you don't always realize uh, when might be the right time to make a movie or write a story or tell a story in this case. So we're going to be talking about going back to the well. This is actually something that I'm going through right now. So as often, what we often try to do on this show is we try to make it timely, and I try to tell people stories about what I'm going through as a creative, as an artist, and really as a business person, because at
Sure.
the end of the day, remember, like, this isn't my hobby. Like, I don't have any other job. There is no other way for me to feed my mouth, and put food on my table and pay my mortgage and all that stuff. So I'm constantly looking for ways to bring that money in by making movies, which means you need to constantly, like rapid fire, like a machine gun, you have to constantly be throwing ideas and concepts at the wall and seeing what sticks. Because the reality is, and I think we've all probably been a victim to this, sometimes we get blinders on and we just focus on one project, and that one project ends up taking up so much time. And if that doesn't quite go your way, now you've wasted a lot of time just investing in one concept. So today we're going to be talking about getting a lot of ideas moving through the air and going back in time and seeing what worked in the past, what didn't work in the past, and how to make it current. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit about Johnny and Clyde premiere weekend, which was, we had a great event at the Odeon Theater in East Greenwich, which was Saturday the 13th. And just a fun night. It's always great to watch a movie with an audience. This was the first time I got a chance to watch Johnny and Clyde with a packed house, and really get that feeling of seeing where the pops come in, seeing where people laugh, seeing where people react. And that's something that, obviously, when you're writing a story, you have an idea of when people are going to react, but you really don't know until you see it. So that's always fun, but at times overwhelming, Mike. These events are
Sure.
great, but they can be overwhelming.
Well, we talked about that a little bit off the air, Tommy, and just to jump in, sometimes when you're the host of an event and it can be a film premiere, it can be a social party, it could be a wedding, it could be anything. If you're the host and you're in that position, a lot of times it's like your job is to make everybody else be comfortable and have a good time. And even though the event might be in your honor, your film premiere, your wedding, whatever, you feel like you're serving more than the event is serving you. And that's a tough one because you're trying to enjoy your movie. You're trying to enjoy the fact that everybody's out to see it and check it out. But at the same time, everybody wants to have their 5-minute conversation with you. And that can be an anxious thing, which kind of adds to the pressure of what you're trying to do here.
Yeah, it really can. I mean, that's the biggest thing. I mean, I'm a pretty sensitive guy, and I like to try to think that I'm able to give time to people, and I like to be approachable and all that stuff. And it's just difficult at these kind of events, because now you're in a room with 400 people that most of these people are friends or they're family members or they're acquaintances. So it's like, it's not like you can just be a stranger in the crowd. You really, you want to say hi to everybody and you want to engage everybody, but you can't. And sometimes it just doesn't happen that way. So if I wasn't able to give anyone a few minutes the other night, I apologize in advance. But it was nuts, man. It was a wild kind of event. And listen, these are all, as they say, quality problems to have. It's nice to know that there are that many people that even give a shit enough to want to come up to you and say hi, and to, say some kind words about the movie. I heard a lot of kind words about the film. I really appreciate that. It was so great to have some of our stars attended. We had Vanessa Angel there, who's just a wonderful person and a super talent, and we just love having her around. And she's kind of quickly become, one of our go-to actors here in Rhode Island. That myself, Verde Productions has worked with her quite a bit. Just an awesome woman altogether. Bai Ling was here, who is just another terrific kind of dynamic personality. Really fun to have her around. She's such a sweetheart, Mike. She sent me a bunch of flowers.
Wow.
I got a whole bunch of flowers from her with like a really nice note thanking me for everything that I did.
Very classy.
I don't know that anyone's ever given me flowers before. So
I sure as hell haven't.
Oh,
I've given you a couple of action figures, but I don't know if I ever gave you a flower. I don't think I have. But
beautiful flowers. So we really appreciate
yeah.
Bai Ling.
She's an international superstar from all accounts.
That's right. She's done so many great action movies, and her career has really been terrific. If you're a fan of Bai Ling, you'll know exactly what we're talking about. And if you're not a fan of Bai Ling, look her up on the old Google machine. I think you'll be impressed with her body of work. Also, Sean Ringgold was in attendance. Sean is an old friend now. We go back all the way to the days of Vault. That was the first time we worked together. Sean plays a character named One Time in this movie, and he's a New Yorker. So he took the 3-hour ride with his beautiful wife, Nicole, and they both attended. And it was great to have them in attendance. And, again, he's just a really big personality. Aside from being a big fella himself, he's a large man. Let me tell you, Sean, every time I see Sean, I kind of forget how just big he is. I'm talking tall, I'm talking massive, I'm talking, all muscle, just a one of those guys that if you saw him in a bar, and it's kind of funny, we had a couple drinks Friday night, the night before the premiere, and just kind of caught up a little bit. And it's funny, he was telling me that like when he's at a bar or at a restaurant, people almost, I wouldn't say always, but there are many times when people just assume he's a professional athlete. Like people are just like, oh, what are you're a football player? Like they just think he's got that kind of size where like if you see him in public, it's like, you're not a civilian. You must, there's something about this, you must make money with this rare size of yours somehow. And in a way he does, because, his size has certainly led him to a lot of casting opportunities, because it's very unique to be, obviously that big, but also be talented. And the fun thing about Sean is, we're kind of going on and on about Sean. We could do ourselves a whole Sean Ringgold episode one of these days, but he's really just one of the sweetest guys. I mean, he's the, I think we all kind of, a lot of times we associate these big men as teddy bears sometimes. He's one of those guys where like, yes, he's big, he's scary, he could throw any normal sized human being through a wall, but he's also one of the sweetest kind of gentle giants out there. So we love Sean. It was great to have him there. And also, Verde Productions is currently making a movie called Chosen Family. And we had Heather Graham and John Brotherton stars. And of course, Heather's actually directing the movie. We're in attendance. So it was a really cool evening. Chad Verde, Michelle Verde, Verde Productions. They put on a really great event. Chad Jr., Paul Luba. Just, they really know how to do it right and make it so that everybody can celebrate the movie, because that's really what a premiere is. Premiere is really just like a moment to kind of take a breath and say, wow, good on you, everybody. Attaboy. Let's enjoy the work we did.
Well, I give the team a lot of credit, because it's you're not even out of the pan and you're still in the frying pan or the next pot or whatever, because you've got Heather Graham in attendance and she's directing Chosen Family. And I know a lot of people up in New England have been getting some work out of that movie. And our friend David Gear has been doing some casting for that one. And that's pretty impressive that it's not, hey, we've got this movie playing tonight, let's sit back on our laurels and smoke a cigar. We're still making another movie. And so that's always good when the work perpetuates more work.
Well, it's always nice to kind of, rub shoulders with people that you may just happen to work with down the road. And, if you look at, my my track record as a filmmaker, and if you look at Verdi Productions' track record, they often work with a lot of what I call repeat offenders. They go back to today's topic is called Back to the Well. Well, they like to go back to the casting well a lot, and you'll see a lot of the same actors in these movies, and that's not an accident. Again, we've talked about this before. That's because you trust these actors and you know what kind of performance you're going to get out of them, and there are no surprises on day one, as they say. But Johnny and Clyde is now available. If you'd like to check it out, it's available streaming on demand. You can check it out if you have Verizon. It's going to be right there on your TV set. Also, Apple TV, Redbox platform, YouTube platform, Amazon Prime, Google Play, Vudu, Xbox. If you're a gamer, you can check it out on there. So there's a lot of different ways to watch Johnny and Clyde, and I sure hope you use one of those ways to check it out, because like I said, it was a very fun movie to watch with a crowd. Watch it with a few buddies, have a laugh, crack a couple of adult beverages if that's your thing, inhale some inhalants that you
Hey,
might
gee
enjoy
whiz, Tommy.
if that's your thing. Have a little fun and watch the movie, because that's what this movie's all about. What are you gee whizzing about, Mike? It's legal
Well,
in most states to inhale some inhalants. What are you, square?
we're trying to keep people in the straight and narrow here, buddy. But I would say that my friend Laza Johnson, who's a big fan of the In Action podcast, is over there in Brisbane, Australia, and somehow he watched Johnny and Clyde and enjoyed it. So that's nice to know that in the international markets, we're big in Australia, big in Brisbane.
Well, you know what? The movie actually came out in Australia before it came out in the United States. That was one of the first countries to get it. And you can get Johnny and Clyde in the equivalent to Best Buy. There's like an equivalent, whatever their big electronics store is. I got to get the name of it. It was funny. I remember looking it up and be like, this looks just like Best Buy, but it's not Best Buy. But
I think it's called Best Buy, mate.
yeah, it very well could be. Charlie Short Films is here. What's up, Charlie? How you doing, brother?
Charlie.
Good to see you this morning. So let's get into it. Let's talk about going back to the well. Timing is everything. And recently I'm at a position where my agent is encouraging me to fire a lot of ammunition out creatively. You can't have enough scripts out there working. And there's only so much time in the day, and we can only write so many scripts at any one current time. So what I've been doing is, I've been at this for a long time, guys. I'm going to be 39 years old this summer, and I've been writing since I was 18, and really didn't get any kind of traction with my scripts and movies until I was about 25, 26. So there was like a whole 6 or 7 year span where I had been writing a lot, but wasn't really doing anything with it. Hadn't really built my relationships in the business yet. A lot of early concepts. And recently I've been kind of going back to some of those early concepts that I had kind of abandoned, and saying to myself, yeah, I know I wrote this when I was 23, but that's a kind of a decent start that I had. Now I'm able to go back to those concepts that I wrote when I was 23, 24, 25, and, didn't know my proverbial ass from my elbow. And now, with the benefit of several years experience, almost a dozen movies that I've directed and written, I'm able to go back and breathe new life into these concepts and say, ooh, that's not too bad. I can do something with this. I'm going to have to tweak here and there, and I'm going to have to utilize some of the skills that I learned. But the reality is, a great concept's a great concept. So I think, it's just important to go back to the well sometimes.
I think a lot of times people, Tommy, can get very frustrated if they put a couple of months or several years even into a script or any type of project, and it doesn't get made right away, or if it doesn't, if the initial response, sometimes, Tommy, I don't know if you've had this problem, but writers particularly tend to hand out their early drafts, to their closest family and friends. A lot of times those family and friends aren't in the entertainment business. They really don't know what's works for entertainment. And so they might it tends to go two ways. Either they prop you up with false bravado, giving you false praise that your script is so great because they've never really read another script, or they shit all over it and make you feel bad, and then you don't take that same script and show it to actual people in the industry. So that's one of those things. It's the what's that term about the don't show your pearls before swine, and not to call anybody's family or friends swine, but if you're looking for approval from those or in your immediate circles, you might be asking the wrong people for their opinion.
Yeah, I think so too, Mike. I think it's a big mistake to give a script to anybody that isn't kind of somewhat involved in the business. Just because reading a script, it's not like reading a paperback book. It's not like reading a magazine, an article, a nice article. It's just such a specific animal in its own right that if you're not a very visually stimulated person, a script might just not read. And like you said, you can get discouraged by a not so credible expert, which is not a good thing. Let's see, we got Ari Bisbin. Ari was in attendance Saturday. Good to see you, brother.
Hi, Ari.
Yes, love these guys. We love you too, Ari.
He sent some nice promotional stuff for the show, so thanks, Ari.
No, very cool. So yeah, it's kind of funny. Like I said, I'm doing this right now. In fact, just the other night, I had written a script with Glenn Ciano so long ago. Like I'm talking like a while ago. And I just remember the title. And, that was probably 5 laptop computers ago. That's how long ago it was. Maybe not 5. I might be exaggerating. But realistically, like 3 laptops ago, 4 laptops ago in time. And I went into my emails and I just wrote the name of the script, which is Riptide. I wrote it up. And boom, sure enough, there it was in an old email. I found an 80-page draft of this script. And it was just wild to see the date was 2011. And I'm just like,
wow,
2011. Holy shit. I wrote this thing with Glenn 12 fucking years ago. And I haven't dusted it off yet, but that's actually after this show. That's one of the things I'm going to do is go back and start reading it. Because like I said, I'm just at a point now where and this is a great thing. Chalk this up under quality problems, but I just have a lot of different producers, production companies coming to me looking for material. And I don't want to ever be in a position where someone asks me for something and I'm just sitting there with like my hands in my pocket and I don't have anything to show. So we're really arming ourselves with a lot of great content right now. So that's why it's kind of funny. You go into the email and you find this script from 12 years ago and I can't fucking wait to read it because I'm sure, I'm going to chuckle at some things that I thought were cool back in 2011 that are probably ridiculous now. And I'm being painfully optimistic, Mike, that I'll read a few scenes and say, oh, wow, that's not bad.
Is it I'm just curious. It sounds like an action script, maybe with an aquatic theme. Am I in the ballpark or no?
You are in the ballpark. It's kind of funny, Mike. I really don't totally remember the concept. Like the concept is still kind of like light in my mind, but I believe it has to do with counterfeiting money. It has to do with a coastal town. It was a fun script. Again, it's going to be so kind of refreshing to go back and dust this bitch off and read it again. It's been so long. And it's kind of funny. This is another kind of cute thing I noticed. I didn't read it, but I just cracked the script open and scrolled through a couple pages. And there are a couple of names in the script that I went on to use in other movies. Like there's a name of a character that I used in Self-Storage. There's a name of a character that I used in Army of the Damned. So it's kind of funny to see, like, although this script died at the time, there were a couple of creative cobwebs, if you will, that actually did go on into other scripts. So that's why it's fun to go back in time. And one thing I could say is, like myself, like I remember, I thought this was on some old laptop. I couldn't find it. And then I dug through. It really is a wonderful filing system, emailing something to yourself. It's so fucking simple and so fucking easy. But like, you could have all the hard drives in the world lying around, all the jump drives, thumb drives, whatever. Just email something to yourself. It's there forever.
The other thing, Tommy, with that is I used to do this. I would email my PDFs and my final drafts to a friend that I could trust in case, for whatever reason, my email got corrupted or I got logged out. And I would say, hey, Mary or Larry or whoever, can you can you dig up that email I sent you 5 years ago? Sometimes it worked. Actually, I did that for a friend of mine. She and I were in that writers group with Carl Dupree, and we used to have this screenwriters group, and I found about 7 or 8 of her scripts that I was able to send to her after 10 years, So this is another little thing. We're in the weeds a little bit, Tommy, but when I've noticed with Gmail that if I send final draft scripts to myself, after a few months or a few years, the final draft scripts, those versions get erased, but the PDFs remain. I don't know why. And that used to be a real problem. But with Final Draft 11, this is a screenwriting program for those that don't know, you can now put your PDF into Final Draft, and it'll translate it into a Final Draft file, and all the reports and everything are back. And that's new to Final Draft 11, and it's a godsend, because if you have an old PDF and you can't find your actual Final Draft file, you import that that PDF into Final Draft, and it'll magically translate. And that's new with the new Final Draft. For all the screenwriting happy people out there, that's very exciting news.
That is a game changer. I remember it being kind of a pain in the ass on multiple times, actually. I, for whatever reason, couldn't get a hold of a Final Draft file, but I had a PDF, and I had to just sit there like an old Franciscan monk and read. Of course, monks wouldn't be typing, but I'd be scribing over from PDF to Final Draft, which, sometimes that can have its benefits because you do a full pass on it. Ariana Pacheco, what's up, Ariana?
Hello, Ariana.
How you doing today? How you doing? Ariana's been doing a little writing herself recently.
Ah, yes, very good.
Ari says, "Damn, Mike, you too good." He is pretty good.
Thanks, Ari.
Today he had a little outburst about Chris Pine before we went on the air.
I've had one lifetime full of Chris Pine movies. I'm sick of them.
Mike's upset that he has to continue to watch Chris Pine. I don't have a problem with Chris. If you're watching this, you can feel free to be in any one of my films. Mike, he's got an issue. I don't know. Charlie says, creativity is a strange phenomenon, don't you think? It really is. And here's what's strange about it. Because we're always evolving, something that you might think is really great 5-10 years ago, you might read now and think it's completely, it's dog food. Whereas sometimes the opposite can happen, where something that you might have thought was a little stale, something that you thought might have been a little plodding, maybe you read it again and it's suddenly a little bit more of a mature story than you thought it was. So yeah, I think it all comes down to like the point of view that you're looking at it. I certainly know that a script I wrote when I was a 23-year-old stoner, kind of just like pretty much just wondering when I'm going to roll my next joint all day. I bet you I had a different sense of humor and a different point of view on what was entertaining, what was funny. And now, I grew up a little bit, and, maybe some of the sophomoric stuff that I thought was funny back then, maybe now I'm like, oh, that's dumb. However, at the same time, this is kind of interesting. Maybe some of the dumb sophomoric stuff that I thought was funny when I was 20-something, although I don't continue to think that's funny, maybe there's the 20-something-year-old kid out there today that would think it's funny. It's kind of interesting. Like Charlie said, creativity is a strange phenomenon. I do think a lot of it's in the eye of the beholder. I don't want to go back into Johnny and Clyde too much, but about a week or two ago, I did my press tour, which is when you're basically doing all these different interviews. And there was a 15-year-old kid who has a very successful podcast, particularly on horror movies. And, some of the reviews, as we talked about last week, haven't been the best. But there was something about this 15-year-old kid. I want to say his name is Dak or Dax. The kid just loved the movie. He really did. And I could tell it wasn't just lip service. I mean, he was quoting lines in the movie. He was citing moments in the film that he liked. And there was this like real kind of teenage excitement. Smells like Teen Spirit, to quote Nirvana.
Kurt Cobain used to say, yeah.
And the kid was just so jazzed up about my movie. And it made me so excited to see that, like, hey, wait a minute. Maybe that's who I wrote this movie for. Maybe it was the 15-year-old kid in me that, was that charged up about film when I was his age. So yeah, creativity is a strange phenomenon, and I think a lot of that has to do with where we're at in our lives when we watch a particular film.
Well, the other thing, buddy, is that no movie is going to make everybody happy. And, Citizen Kane, 90% of the critics might love it and 10% might hate it. I think Citizen Kane's a great movie, but a very educated friend of mine doesn't like Citizen Kane, and that's just one example. I mean, I think my sister never saw the original Star Wars movies. Tommy, she, for whatever reason, the whole thing of Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader and Princess Leia, she did not want to go see it. So, film is a subjective medium. When movies get made, it's subjective choices by producers and directors and actors what material to work on. How many times have we heard stories of some famous actor passed on some great movie and, oh, do you regret that you passed on that role? And then audiences have their choices too. Some of the movies, like I saw last night, the Dungeons and Dragons movies, I thought it started strong and then it got to feel like every other movie. But if I was a 12-year-old kid who never saw Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones or Highlander, and I went to see Dungeons and Dragons movies, I might think that all this stuff is new, the dragons and the flying cats and everything. It's all new stuff. It's subjective. And that 15-year-old podcast host that interviewed you, he was in sync with Johnny and Clyde. And guess what? In 20 years, that 15-year-old kid's going to be 35. He might be running a studio. So he might be giving you a call or some such thing. And the critics that didn't like the movie might be in the casket. Who knows?
Well, I did offer the young man a job. The youngster himself really loves film. And I said to him, I'll tell you what, buddy, you graduate school, give me a call. I'll get you a job on one of these movies. And I meant that. So, Dak, if you're listening to my show, and if your name is Dax and not Dak, I apologize. I know it's one or the other. You got a job still. I meant my word. When you graduate, you come see me. We'll put you to work in this movie world. But yeah, Mike, I think you're absolutely right. Like Charlie said here, I think it is all about timing. Stephen E checks in. What's up, Stephen? Good to see you, friend. Ari, I think you just heard a little bit of Mike's Dungeons and Dragon review. Maybe we'll save that for another time. What's up, Stephen? Hey, Ari, Ariana, Tommy, Mike. Good to see everybody. We love our little community here we built on And Action. So let's keep it going. So yeah, we did talk about timing is everything. It's kind of funny. I had a movie that I wrote about curling, the Olympic sport. And when I wrote it, nobody gave a shit about curling.
Sure.
It was the Olympic sport that people, and I actually wrote it because it was such a ridiculous sport in general. And then, when I wrote the first draft, probably in, I think, 2008, going way back, it was one of the first scripts I wrote. And I saw over like a 10 to 12 year span, like every few Olympics, or every few years, every Winter Olympics, curling got more and more sexy, popular, exciting. People start tuning into curling. I believe the United States won a curling gold medal recently. So it's kind of funny how now suddenly people are asking me about my curling script. Hey, do you have that curling script still? And it's kind of funny because I literally wrote that when I was 23 years old, and it would require a great deal of spackle paint touch-ups, if you will. But yeah, I got a script about curling that nobody really gave a shit about 10 years ago, but now suddenly curling's a little bit more. It's an ironic sport, right? I think everybody likes curling because it's like, how could they be? We think of an Olympic gold medal as such a rare thing to achieve, and usually it requires such a unique skill set that you are literally one of only a few small handful of people on the fucking planet can do this one thing. So we will give you this gold fucking medal. Curling's about throwing rocks on the ice and sweeping with a fucking Swifter to get it in the middle of a bullseye. Not knocking it. I'm sure it's tough. Never tried it myself. But my point is, you don't exactly have to be born with these incredible gifts of physical athleticism to be a curling champ. I mean, it's probably just one of those things you have to practice a lot at to get good at. Yeah, it's a lot of mechanics. And again, please, Curlers Society of America or the world, don't come down on me for this. You know it's a fucking easy sport. Don't go fucking trying to tell me that you have some crazy muscle fibers in your forearm from sweeping, or you have some crazy ability to gauge the distance between you and the icy bullseye. It's a fun game. I digress. That's what it's all about. Timing. You never know what you wrote about that might not have been hot before, but now suddenly is in vogue. Or maybe, maybe a script might have been too violent for back in the day, and now suddenly like audiences are accustomed to that. Or maybe your script was too sexual, or maybe it wasn't sexual enough. Society changes so much every few years that it's important to kind of just go back to the well once in a while and see if you've got anything.
Well, Tommy, I was going to say about your script, Riptide, the sense of humor in that script, when you wrote it in 2011, now here in 2023, that sense of humor might be considered retro or a throwback, and that might nostalgic and a timepiece. Like suddenly, instead of just having an old script that didn't do anything, now you've got a nostalgic piece or a time period piece, because every generation likes to think that their coming of age is the best time ever. So, like in the 90s, when people were making stuff about the 60s and 70s, that generation was excited, and for instance, 5 or 10 years ago, I saw a movie, the actor, it was called mid 2000s it was called mid 90s. And it was actually shot in 4:3. And it was about skate kids in the mid 1990s. And the movie came out maybe 2015, 2016. So in 2016, a movie about the mid 90s is a retro movie or a nostalgia movie. So that's just the clock. The clock is always ticking on us. And we just have to experience that. When Happy Days was a show that took place in the 1950s, but it was made in the late 1970s. And, so it's just the way things go.
Yes, nostalgia is a big part of it. We're going to talk about that a little bit when we get into our next chapter about going back to the well creatively. But before we do that, just again, remember, we'd like to think that we're always getting better at what we do. And if you were frustrated by one script that you thought, oh man, this happens a lot, and you should go back and watch our writing episode in the archives and find some helpful hints of how you don't get stuck. But if you find yourself like, oh man, I wrote 60 really good pages and now I'm stuck, and I just don't know how to write those final 30, 40 pages and land this thing. Well, maybe 5 years ago when you quit on the script, you weren't good enough to land it. Maybe if you go back now, you've learned how to write, how to land a show, how to stick the landing. And maybe now you go back and some of those challenges won't be quite as difficult as they were the last time you visited the script.
Tommy, during the pandemic, when things were really coming to a halt with a lot of stuff, and I had just moved here to Florida, so I didn't have a lot of connections with anybody, and suddenly making connections is not even an option. You know what I mean? So I put a lot of time into taking a couple of screenplays, A Distance from Avalon and Fight or Play Basketball and Bad Girls with Good Tattoos. And basically I translated those screenplays into novels. And for me, that was very rewarding, because writing the same story in a different format allowed the characters to have more time on the page. I could explore scenes that maybe worked for the novel that didn't work for the screenplay. After I was done reading those novels, I could go back to the screenplay and make changes on them. It was pretty rewarding. And, that's just because of necessity. The necessity was I wanted to be creative, but in a time of pandemic, it's not the best time to go out and meet new friends and influence people and make a low budget movie. So that's what I did.
Yeah, I think, it's important to take a look at what you have. It kind of reminds me of this next kind of concept that I've done in the past. Sometimes if you have two failing concepts that aren't working, and you have a start of one story and the start of another story, you might even be able to combine your two stories, and say like, oh, are there any synergies between these two different scripts? Is this script maybe one script? And I know that sounds crazy. It's almost like, putting an addition onto a house. But it's like if you have one concept, but you don't quite have the feature length firepower or horsepower, and then you have another kind of incomplete concept that doesn't quite have the horsepower to get to the finish line. Sometimes two not so great ideas can be combined into one really great idea. And the same thing goes for characters. Like maybe there was a character in an old script that you wrote that, well, the script never really got off the ground, but I did like that character. Don't be afraid to take that character, rip that son of a bitch right out of that script that wasn't working, and insert that character into a script that you do feel confident about. Because remember, it's still your intellectual property. You're not stealing from yourself. Don't be afraid to, have that character in a different light, in a different story, in a different world. That's worked for me quite a few times in the past, actually. Let's see. Everybody is chatting over here. Agreed. The TV show Bates Motel did a great job mixing nostalgia with modern day. I got to check out Bates Motel. I never got into that. Kim says, hi, everyone. What's up, Kim?
Hello, Kim.
Kim. The Whale did a good job of making a screenplay, minimal cast and location for Pandemic. So did the movie The Reading. The cool thing about The Whale started off as a play.
Right.
So, the idea, like Steven said, it was a very minimal cast, very minimal locations. And a lot of that has to do with, again, you take something that was already designed for the theater where we know that, okay, it's not going to be super heightened and fantastical. And I shouldn't say that because theater can be heightened and fantastic. It's just, that it's going to be made in such a way where we're not going to have a ton of locations. It's going to be a little bit more stripped down maybe. And that goes to show you the importance of when you have a great story and great dialogue and terrific actors, you don't need much. You really don't. And I think that if I could give myself a critique, and this isn't a writing episode of this podcast, but I think my biggest mistake writing is I've always overcomplicated things. And when you watch a movie like The Whale, you realize like we've heard it a million fucking times, but you truly learn that less is more. And if it's done right and truly developed, you don't need a lot to tell a great story. You can fill up those 90 to 120 minutes with just great storytelling, great actors, simple story.
Saturday Night Live did a pretty funny parody of The Whale called The Rhino. So if anybody likes SNL, or if they don't, check out that skit. It was from recently. They did a I wouldn't say a parody, but an homage to The Whale, the Rhino skit from the last year or so. I think Woody Harrelson played the Rhino.
Let's see. Charlie says there is a great movie called Druk, Another Round, Denmark, about consistently having 0.05% alcohol in your blood to be creative and more productive, and only during work time. Maybe. That's funny. I think my life would be very unique if I was constantly pumped with just a little bit of alcohol.
If you wouldn't be dead pretty soon, Charlie, what are you trying to do here, buddy?
Well, maybe you might be in a good mood, or some people might not be the best thing. Could lead to some bad habits down the road. But whatever floats your proverbial boat. I'm one of those kind of guys who, as long as you're not hurting others, I say have at it. Ari says Wes Anderson has been inspiring young black filmmakers to do his stylistic of film style of films, but the hood version. That'd be pretty cool. It's funny. I was listening to some Wes Anderson soundtracks the other day as I was looking for temp track for my pilot, The Florist. So it would be really cool to see that and see how that style influences the music in Wes Anderson's movies. Because I feel like Wes Anderson's music is always very specific and kind of, really everything Wes Anderson does is specific. He's one of those filmmakers that what's cool about him is I love when I'm watching a filmmaker and I'm watching a movie and I already know who the filmmaker is style-wise, like before anything happens. It's a rare thing. It's a unique thing. You can really only name like 4 or 5 directors that really truly have that. Obviously Tarantino comes to mind. Obviously Scorsese comes to mind. I think if you really know what you're looking for, Michael Mann comes to mind. John Waters comes to mind.
It's Spike Lee at times.
Spike Lee certainly has a style, but just some of those filmmakers where like within 5 minutes of the movie, if you had missed the opening credits, you'd probably be able to guess who made the movie. I'm still trying to develop my style. It takes a long time, and it's not fucking easy to do.
Didn't Wes Anderson film something in Rhode Island in Newport 5 or 10 years ago, Tommy?
Yeah, he did. Moonrise Kingdom was a film he did about scouts, like Boy Scouts. It's funny, I actually never saw that movie. Recently, you guys got to understand, there was a whole period in my life where it was hard for me to watch movies. And I know what you're saying. What are you talking about? I was so upset with where I was at in my own career and kind of felt as though when I would watch other movies, I would almost get depressed because I would say to myself, well, that's what I should be doing. Like, how come I'm not doing that? Why aren't my movies like this? When do I get to do my thing? And it was actually kind of like not a productive thing. I almost banned myself from taking in a lot of great content for many years. And really just recently, I've kind of gotten back into watching films again with an open heart and not so jaded. I think a lot of times when you're in the business, I guess I could liken it to a magician watching a magic show. And when a magician watches a magic show, it's not fun for the magician because it's like, all right, yep, I know you got a trap door in your jacket. That's where you pull the rabbit out. Yeah, I know there's a little bit of gunpowder in the bottom, and when it sparks up, that's how you get that cloud of smoke. You know all the tricks, and you know how they're done, and sometimes that can take you out of it. But recently, I've been trying to more and more just like tell that magician to shut the fuck up and enjoy the movie. Calling myself a magician.
Sounds like a competitive thing. Like you were watching these movies that had big budgets and big stars and winning awards and accolades, and there's a competitive fire in you that's saying, well, screw these guys. What about my scripts? And I feel that way oftentimes myself, Tommy, and I think a lot of people can relate to that. If you're in a position in life, and I don't know if that's ever satisfied. I mean, I would argue that even Robert De Niro is sitting there watching Scent of a Woman with Al Pacino and thinking, I could have done that movie. I think that competitive fire never fully ends with some folks. And if you can tame it and kind of recognize it and incorporate that into your own learning process, that's great. But I think that might be part of it.
I think that's part of it. And I think it was also part of me, again, just not being happy with where I was at in my own career. And saying to myself, well, yeah, anybody can make a good movie if they give you $50 million. And you know what that is? That's just that's being a little bitch, that kind of talk. And I hear it. Listen, I hear that kind of talk on my movie sets from these young, like 20-somethings. Anybody could do that if they gave you $100 million. And it's like, you know what? You sound like such a little bitch when you say that kind of talk. Because here's the deal. They didn't just give that person $100 million. That person fought, scratched, scraped for many years to get the privilege of a studio being like, okay, we believe in you. We're going to give you all this money to go tell this story. So it's kind of like, it sounds like such fucking sour grapes. And if I could grab myself by the 20-something-year-old collar and paintbrush myself a couple times, I would. Because you just sound like a little bitch when you talk like that. There's really no other way to say it. And people love to criticize at that point. Oh, he had all that money and the movie still sucked. And it's like, you just want to say like, oh, yes, because we all know you could do such a better job. It's Tommy, sour.
I saw something, believe it or not, on Instagram, one of those 15-second videos that for whatever reason struck a chord with me. It was basically a content creator, not a very successful one apparently. And he made this little video that said, when my friends ask me, why am I not rich and famous yet? I tell them, because you didn't share my link. And I looked at that, Tommy, and I thought about it, and I could relate to it. I understood his opinion because sure, I get upset if people don't click on everything that I do or buy every book or buy every whatever. And then I kind of realized, is it really the job of your friends to make you rich and famous? Is it they have their own stuff to do? They're paying their bills, they're picking up their kids from school, they're getting a neck surgery. Is it up to this audience on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter they have nothing better to do but to share your material. And so that kind of resonated with me, Tommy, that it's not up to the audience to make the performer. If your friends and family are not copying and sharing your stuff, it's because they don't want to, and you're not
Well, here's the
motivating them.
deal, Mike. You're a little nicer than me.
Oh boy.
I'm just gonna come out and say it. If they're not sharing your stuff, it's because it's not good enough.
Right.
You're not good enough. And I
Yeah,
know
yeah.
it's hard to hear, but like you can't knock other people for not wanting to jump behind your kind of mediocre shit.
Yeah, and it's not their responsibility to. If you want a marketing team, then you have to go out, get the money, and hire a marketing team. And none of this stuff is easy. And I would say, Tommy, that I think in this day and age where we see enough examples of, you know, the Logan Pauls or the Kim Kardashians of the world, I think people have a distorted view of how hard it is to break through. Now, granted, the opportunities with social media have widened up the playing field quite a bit, but still, it's a lot of hard work, and nobody owes you anything. You know, is what they would say.
No, and I think that here's the thing, and we're not gonna we're really going off the beaten path about what this episode's about now, so I'm gonna put a stop to that. But basically, the Logan Pauls of the world, people want to knock a Logan Paul. That motherfucker put so much effort into his YouTube channel. Him and his brother put so much effort into creating content for years, like long before any of this mega stardom took place. So it's like a lot of times, you know, you don't see the incredible construction to the foundation of the building. That's where all the work is done, right? Because it's underground. But those motherfuckers built that foundation a long time ago, and that's why they have this amazing skyscraper of success. You don't see the foundation. It's underground, but it's there. And I think that everybody wants to be successful right fucking now today. And I think that's kind of part of the problem.
20 years to be an overnight success is what they've said, Tommy.
Yeah, exactly. Let's go back quick, check on what some people are saying, and then we're going to move on to our last topic and wrap this bad boy up. Let's see here. Something to work on, one location, minimal cast. Let me tell you something, brother. You're not wrong, but that is a lot easier said than done. I've made a one location film before. My first movie was self-storage, all took place in a self-storage facility. And it's doable and it's plausible and it's possible, but it's a challenge. It becomes like this shtick where you're always like, well, it's one location, but we're also going to be in an apartment, but we're also going to do this. And, you know, it's a challenge. I know it sounds easy, but it's not. Trust me. Ari says, yes, I like the thought, one location in a great but small cast. Again, guys, awesome concept. Really, really challenging because it's just the audience has that old attention span thing. And when you just have 3 or 4 people in a room, I mean, look at some of the great one location movies. They're really not one location movies. Like look at Reservoir Dogs. It's like there's a lot that goes into something like that. So again, it's just like it's a great concept. It's just anyone who wants to do the whole one location small cast thing, really, really make sure that those characters are developed because you're just going to be stuck with them for 90 minutes. Ariana, knowing how the magic is done is one thing that I really enjoy watching movies and plays. I feel like it gives me an increased appreciation and makes it more exciting for me. But is it just weird? Well, listen, I get that side of it too. If you know what it is that the artist did to achieve what they achieved, it certainly is like a step back in applause. You know, I was watching a Michael Cimino movie called The Year of the Dragon. Really great Mickey Rourke movie from the 80s. If you haven't seen it, it's fucking badass old school action. And Michael Cimino is known as a filmmaker for just awe-inspiring shots with tons of background actors and just a lot going on in the frame. Movies within movies, little vignettes happening on the street, like as we're just panning. And as I was watching it, it really was amazing to just, you know, that was a moment where I kind of sat back and enjoyed it because, like you said, Ariana, I know what it took to fucking do that and the sheer people power that went into orchestrating those kind of scenes. You just got to tip your cap. But, you know, at the same time, you know, once in a while, it can desensitize you when you see like a particular shot, and you're like, oh, I know that that's a, like I was watching Dead Presidents, 1995, a Hughes brother movie starring Lorenz Tate. Really great movie. Chris Tucker's in there. And there's this one scene where, like, it was a really great scene, but this, I could see so clearly, like, where this guy gets hit by a car, and it's, like, so obvious that it's a dummy. And I'm just like, hey, you guys couldn't have just, tweaked it a little bit so it wasn't so obvious that you're just hitting a mannequin with a car. And those are the little things that, like, an average person who's not a movie person might just gloss over. And again, it takes you out of the illusion, because, like, once you're thinking about that, you're not able to keep pace with the next scene. You're taken out of it. But that's my own problem.
I haven't seen the Hughes brothers in quite some time. They were the big thing for a while. It's such a fickle industry. I remember that they had a big couple of years, but I can't remember the last time I saw a Hughes brothers film.
Yeah, it's been a while, but that's a good movie. Really, really, really cool makeup design too. They've got these, like, skeleton faces, which is really dope. I love sitting down and watching this show. It's like going back to school with the coolest gym teachers.
Oh, gee whiz. Thanks a lot.
I appreciate that. All right.
Thanks, sorry.
Kim Kardashian, Tommy, Mike, no sex tapes. I promise we will not do that. Logan Paul pranks, maybe. Hey, man, the guy, say what you want about Logan Paul. People like that young man, and I'm one of them. The Pauls are serial entrepreneurs. I like that term a lot, Ari. Yeah, they know how to make money with their brand. I agree with that, Tommy. When it's obvious, but when it's well done, yeah, it really does. It's like, I guess, Ariana, it's almost like going into a museum and watching, taking a look at a wonderful work of art and knowing what it is that made it special. It's nice to kind of once in a while sit back and just applaud.
Well, Tommy, it makes me appreciate the work that our buddy Nick Principe did on The Mick and the Trick, when he literally went over a car in a stunt scene for the character that I played. So it makes me appreciate the fact that he can do that. And like you said from that earlier example, sometimes they just use a dummy. But Tommy, is there did we not accomplish the goal of this show? Was there, because I'm looking at the notes here, and is there more that you want to say about this going to the well concept?
Yeah, there is. We're going to kind of, like I said, just cap this thing off now. So another thing that I wanted to kind of just tell everybody is, and this is probably, I don't want to say a topic for another day, but you certainly could do a whole episode on just this concept. But you got to go back to the well creatively. Something that I've been doing recently is watching a lot of old movies and TV shows from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. I feel like there's maybe a 10-year creative period of relevance, maybe not even 10, maybe it's 5 years. But I feel like if a movie or even a book came out, if it hasn't come out in the last 5 years, people just fucking forget about it. And it's amazing how many great films have just been lost to the hands of time. And as artists, it's our jobs to almost be detectives and go back and dust off all those cold case files and take a look at all these great films from the 70s, great films from the 80s, even the early 90s. That I work with a lot of young people now. I get a chance to have a lot of early 20-somethings on my sets. And we'll be having our little movie conversations in between setups or whatever. And I'm fascinated how many times I mention these, like, great fucking movies from not that long ago. All right, we're talking about, like, movies from 1999, movies from 2000, 2001. These kids haven't fucking heard a lick of them. Now, granted, there's always going to be cinephiles out there. There's always going to be the movie experts that go back and they can tell you every director, every writer, every actor. We're always going to have people like that. I'm talking about the vast majority of people. They forget, like, movies kind of come and go. So what I'm saying to you in a very nice way is you should be going back and stealing everything you can from these older films. And when I say stealing, I'm being kind of tongue-in-cheek about it, but you should be finding shots that you like and paying homage to these sequences. And you can almost take a sequence shot for shot from a movie that came out, some amazing movie. And I'm not even talking about random movies. There's probably, like, an Academy Award nominated film from 1972 that nobody has ever fucking seen. that you can go right in there, you could pop it in, and you could be like, oh my God, I love this shot. Oh my God, I love this sequence. Wow, I love how they decided to just do this slow push in and just stick on that one character the whole scene. There's all these great things that your mind will just open up to, and nobody's touching them. They're all ripe for the taking. So as we go back to the well creatively with all of our concepts that we want to dust off, you should be dusting off old movies. You should be dusting off old TV shows. And hey, if you're not a writer director, even for people like Ari, if you're an actor, go watch these old actors. Watch the choices they make. See what they do. You might find something really cool that some old actor did and be like, oh man, I want to do that. I want to try that when I do this scene in my upcoming film or whatever it is. But there's just so much information out there. And I think sometimes we get blinders and we only look at like what came out in the last 3 years, right? Like the Netflix approach. Like, well, if it's not on Netflix and it hasn't been in my little queue here, it just never happened. So I urge you all to go out there and find the answers to the future by digging through movies of the past.
Recency bias is, I think, the term that people use for these days, Tommy. And sometimes they use it in sports when people say, oh, LeBron James is the greatest. And then some older guy will say, Michael Jordan's the greatest. Well, how about the fact that Bill Russell won all those championships and dominated, his opponents? You know what I mean? And but it's recency bias, and that's fine. But if you can overcome that, you'll be doing yourself a favor by educating yourself. When you were talking, Tommy, it reminded me of one of my favorite films and one of my favorite actors that people don't really talk about, Christopher Lambert and his character of the Highlander in the original 1986 Highlander film with Sean Connery and the Immortals and the sword fighting. There was a bunch of sequels. There was even a TV series. None of that stuff compares to the first film that needs to be seen. I think it's a great movie. I wish that they would reissue that on the big screen. They've been talking about a reboot of that franchise for 20 years and it hasn't happened. A lot of good things here, Tommy. I have a feeling that this concept is perhaps something we'll go back to in another 4 or 5 months for a follow-up, because I feel like there's more meat on the bone on this concept of going back to the well that you've brought to the table today.
I appreciate that, Mike. Yeah, it's been fun to kind of chat about that stuff, and it seems like our And Action Faithful has enjoyed it as well. You never know, guys. Sometimes the answer to your questions are right under your fucking nose, and all you got to do is pop a movie in like it's a VHS tape.
Right.
Slide that VHS tape in, hear the mechanisms and the gears, grab the plastic, spool that fucking little black ribbon, whatever the hell that thing is, and watch some old nostalgia and learn. And damn it, rip it off. And don't think of it like stealing. It's not stealing. You're bringing it back to life. Because if you didn't steal that shot, here's the thing. You might steal a shot from a movie, right? And some kid might see it. And they might even find out from some elder. Some elder might say, hey, stole that shot right out of, name that movie. You know what? Maybe that 15-year-old kid says, oh, that sounds cool. I'm going to go watch Name That Movie. Now you're breathing life into something that was dead, that kid would have never seen in a million years. But, I mean, we've seen this a lot in music, right? How many times have you heard like a really cool song that samples something? They sample like a beat. This happens all the time in hip hop. They'll sample a really cool beat and you're like, I love that. And then someone will say, hey, that's from blah, blah, blah. That came out 25 years ago. And then you'll go back and you'll listen to that song, and now you're a fan of that song too. Well, it's all good.
A good example of that, Tommy, is the song Under Pressure, which is now my favorite Queen and David Bowie song. That song was dead on arrival until Vanilla Ice came out with Ice Ice Baby and the whole controversy because he used the hook without getting permission, and then they had to retroactively sign agreements and everybody was happy. But the song Under Pressure, it was a song. It was a big hit after Ice Ice Baby. Tommy, I wanted to mention that you're talking about great movies of the past. Even the pandemic years, when the movie theaters back in 2020 first got reopened, the first movie I think I saw was Tom Hanks in News of the World. That's a great movie that really doesn't get talked about because it came out while most movie theaters were closed. But if people are looking for a really great movie, it's very unique. It has a great kind of father-daughter story. Tom Hanks And the girl that plays the young woman in that movie, I think she's going to be a big star. That's News of the World.
That
The other
was
thing,
a great movie. He goes
yeah,
around reading to people.
yeah, and
If
it's
you
like
wanna
a
watch if you want to watch Tom Hanks read for 90 minutes, check out News of the World.
well, he doesn't read for 90 minutes.
It's better than that. I'm just
There's a few good things. And then Tommy, I wanted to go back to a thing in the early part of the show. You were talking about you have all these people at this premiere for Johnny and Clyde, and you feel bad if you don't thank everybody. But I give you a little bit of solace here, buddy, because apparently with The Undertaker, when he got into the WWE Wrestling Hall of Fame, he thanked all his opponents. He thanked The Rock and Steve Austin and Shawn Michaels, but he forgot to thank good old Mankind, Mick Foley, the guy that he threw off the top of his cell, and they had the buried alive match and all that stuff. So people went to Mick Foley and they said, "Hey, Mick, do you feel that you've been insulted? Did the Undertaker, hang you out to dry? Did he shortchange you? He didn't thank you?" And Mick Foley said, "Well, I could be mad at the Undertaker, but when I got into the Hall of Fame and I made my speech, I thanked everybody in the world except my wife." So Mick said, sometimes you just get up there. If you have notes, if you don't have notes, if you're trying to do off the cuff, sometimes you just slip, and it's not that you forgot somebody. I mean, yes, you did forget somebody, but it's not that you purposely tried to hurt their feelings. It's just that it's a lot of pressure to make. And yes, these are first world problems. We get it. Nobody's in Somalia with a gun to their head and a pit of snakes underneath them. But still, we can all be human and make errors.
It's true, man. I had a little pressure, and I don't mean to just throw this at the end of the episode, but I have to give the most sincere apology to Glenn Ciano and Mike Braga. Those are two really important guys that mean the world to me. Glenn's been my friend for literally since pretty much my first day in the business. Mike Braga's been my assistant and kind of right-hand man for a couple years now. And, these are guys that I rode with every single day on the way to film Johnny and Clyde. They were as in the trenches with me as possible. And I fucked up, to be honest. And I made my speech before the movie the other night, and I named a lot of people, and I just did not name them. And I had notes, and they were there, but you're up there, you're in front of a few hundred people, and it's moving quick, and there's that voice in your head that's like, wrap it up, wrap it up, wrap it up. And they just got lost in the shuffle, and that's not okay. And I do feel bad. And guys, I don't know how, and I don't know when. I promise Glenn and Mike, I will make this up to you, and you will get your due someday. I don't mean to be all mean Mark Callis about it.
I think you have to buy them a copy of Fight or Play Basketball. It's already available on Amazon. I can see Glenn Ciano and Mike Braga sitting there for hours reading my book, and they'll say, "Tommy, how better to apologize to us than by providing us with a copy of Mike Messier's Fight or Play Basketball? Every shot counts." That's a true act of friendship, Tommy, and I'm glad that you're going to consider that.
Well, I sure will, Mike. I sure will. All right, and we have Scott here. What's up, Scott? Unrelated,
Scott.
but congrats on the release date for The Collective. Excited to watch it on August 4th. Thank you very much, Scott. I am super stoked about that, and we will be doing an episode on The Collective in long form probably that week. We'll probably plan it out so we do an episode the week that it comes out, and we can tell you all about what it was like to work with Lucas Till and Ruby Rose and Tyrese Gibson, and of course Mercedes Moné. If you're a wrestling fan, we had a lot of fun on that movie. We'll be talking all about that. So guys, thank you so much for joining us. If you haven't already, please go out there and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And anyone who feels like sharing this program out onto their story, onto their Facebook, we really appreciate it. It means the world to us. I'm not going to be like that guy that Mike mentioned and be like, this show is not successful because you're not sharing the link.
You're not sharing the link.
But it does go a long way, and we really do appreciate it. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Even shows are stealing stories from classic films. Man, I'll tell you what, real quick side note, I've been watching some Forensic Files, and I've been getting some concepts for movies just from watching Forensic Files. Like, you never know where that inspiration is going to get you. You better be taken from people. If they're going to be given, you got to be taken. All right, here we go. See you, Charlie. Good to see you. Everybody, Oh, Andres Luis Sanchez. Andres, what's up, brother?
All these comments, very exciting.
Yeah, thanks for pouring in all the comments. Thanks for pouring in all the support. We appreciate it. We love doing this every Tuesday. And we'll see you next week when we're going to be talking about a very fun, very topical discussion. We're going to be talking about the impact of AI on the movie business. And what does everyone think about that? Are the robots going to come take my job? Are the robots going to be writing scripts? Are the robots going to be acting in movies? We're going to talk all about it next week. So we can't wait to see you then. And until then, go out, check out Johnny and Clyde, subscribe to my channel, subscribe to Mike's channel. We'll see you next week on An Action, episode 45.